Chapter 1. The Day God Died. How God's chosen nation murdered its own king. Matthew 26 and 27, Mark 14 and 15, Luke 22 and 23, John 18 and 19. Pontius Pilate had a dilemma on his hands. It was the Jewish Holy Week of Passover, and Jerusalem, a city of about 50,000 people, was packed with some 150,000 celebrants from Middle Eastern and Mediterranean nations. As the Roman governor of Judea, Pilate had good reason for concern. Since the Romans had conquered the fiercely independent nation of Israel in 63 B.C., insurrections were a constant threat as groups of nationalist zealots, smarting under Roman occupation, frequently rose up to defy their conquerors. The volatility in the atmosphere was palpable. Such an influx of people was difficult to manage under the best of conditions, but on this particular Passover in A.D. 33, the tension was ratcheted up several notches by rumors that the miracle-working rabbi named Jesus would be present. Many Jews thought this man was the long-awaited Messiah. The last thing Pilate wanted was a report to Caesar that he had allowed a revolt against Roman authority in this already explosive region. As Roman procurators did at every Jewish feast, Pilate brought hundreds of Roman soldiers into Jerusalem to enforce order. The elite Jewish ruling council, known as the Sanhedrin, believed in a coming Messiah, and they were on the lookout for him. They thought the one who would release them from their oppressors would be a powerful ruler, a man of religious and political clout. This Jesus did not fit their expectations. He was born in obscurity to poor parents. He had no formal education. He appeared to be nothing more than an itinerant street preacher, and he mixed with the rabble, not only with common fishermen, tradesmen, and turncoat tax collectors, but also with known sinners, such as prostitutes and ceremonially unclean people, including lepers. The members of the Sanhedrin were frustrated by Jesus, who seemed to have no respect for the religious leaders' traditions and, in their eyes, no respect for the law of Moses. They were particularly outraged by his seeming violations of the Sabbath rules. One of the 10 Commandments is, "Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy." Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. This meant that no work was to be done on the 7th day of the week. The Jewish leaders had encrusted that simple law with a mountain of restrictions that buried the Sabbath in legalism. Then along came Jesus, flagrantly violating their rules by healing sick people and plucking handfuls of grain for his disciples to eat on that day. Worst of all, these Jewish leaders saw Jesus as a blasphemer. When he made claims that indicated he saw himself as God, the Jewish leaders needed no more evidence against him. Such apparent contempt and irreverence fit the very definition of blasphemy. The heretic must die. But there were obstacles. Jesus had become immensely popular with the people. He had won them over with his miracles and healings, along with his vivid teachings, which delivered deeper insights than they had ever heard. The people were flocking to this polarizing figure and slipping out from under the Sanhedrin's control. It was becoming evident that he was a threat to their power and influence. Popular or not, Jesus had to go. The Sanhedrin's murderous plot. In the tradition of Jewish rabbis, Jesus had surrounded himself with a small group of men who followed him and listened to his teachings. Like the teachers of his day, he was training them to carry on the work he had begun. In the Gospels, these men are called disciples, a word meaning follower, student, or adherent. Like others who thought Jesus was the Messiah, these disciples expected him to raise an army and drive the Romans from their land. Just when the Sanhedrin's anger with Jesus was escalating into a plan to kill him, they had a timely visit from one of Jesus' disciples, Judas Iscariot. As it turned out, it didn't take much for Judas to turn his back on his teacher. "How much will you pay me to betray Jesus to you?" he asked them. They offered 30 silver coins. and he placed Jesus into their hands. Judas timed his betrayal to occur when Jesus returned from praying in the Garden of Gethsemane after celebrating Passover with his disciples. He approached his master and greeted him with a traditional Middle Eastern kiss on both cheeks. This act identified Jesus for the throng of police officers and officials who were lurking in the shadows. As they surged forward to make the arrest, Jesus' companion Peter assumed that the rebellion had begun. He drew his sword and slashed at the arresting official, slicing off his ear. John 18, verse 10. But to Peter's surprise, Jesus stopped him. "Put away your sword," Jesus told him. "Those who use the sword will die by the sword." Matthew 26, verse 52. Jesus picked up the severed ear and, with a miraculous touch, reattached it to the man's head. Luke 22, verse 51. Peter was shocked. Was there to be no revolt? Just what was Jesus about? Only an hour or so earlier, Peter had vowed to stand by his master through thick and thin, saying, "Lord, I am ready to go to prison with you and even to die with you." Luke 22, verse 33. But Jesus, knowing that Peter had misunderstood the nature of his mission, said, "Peter, let me tell you something. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." Luke 22, verse 34. At the moment of Jesus' arrest, all but 2 of his disciples fled for their lives, fulfilling one of many Old Testament prophecies. "Strike down the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered." Zechariah 13, verse 7. Peter, however, was not among those who scattered. Though reeling from Jesus' unexpected arrest, he was determined to stick by his beloved master in spite of the danger to his own life. He followed at a distance as the temple police led Jesus to the home of Caiaphas, the high priest, for a trial. Peter watched from the courtyard, warming his hands by a fire, when a servant girl recognized him. "You were one of those with Jesus, the Galilean," she said. Matthew 26, verse 69. But Peter emphatically denied it. But others around the fire recognized him and asked the question twice more. With increasing vehemence, Peter claimed each time that he didn't even know Jesus. Immediately after Peter's third denial, a rooster crowed in the distance. Peter remembered Jesus' prediction that he would slip into disloyalty. Shamed and guilt-ridden, Peter fled the scene and went into hiding with the other disciples. Inside the house of Caiaphas, Jesus faced the first of 5 trials he was to endure. Caiaphas questioned him harshly, but Jesus offered no response until the high priest said, "Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus answered, "You have said it." Matthew 26, verses 63 and 64. That was all Caiaphas needed. In a rage, he ripped his robe and accused Jesus of speaking blasphemy, which, according to Jewish law, was punishable by death. Caiaphas had Jesus beaten, and then he sent him to the Sanhedrin for an official trial. This second trial was so riddled with illegal and unjust maneuvers that no one familiar with Jewish customs would think it was legitimate. They tried Jesus at night, which was against the Jewish law. They presumed he was guilty at the outset, which was also against the Jewish law. They hired false witnesses to testify against him, a blatantly illegal act in any courtroom. They mistreated Jesus as a prisoner, scourging and beating him, and they provided him with no legal defense. The entire trial, from beginning to end, was a travesty of justice. The Jewish council, having condemned Jesus to death, but lacking the legal power to execute him, sent him to Governor Pilate for his third trial. Pilate, no doubt irritated at being bothered so early in the morning with what he considered a Jewish affair, began to question Jesus. He soon realized that the Jewish leaders were seeking his death out of sheer jealousy, and he told them he could find no fault in Jesus, but the Jews insisted that his teaching had stirred up trouble in both Judea and Galilee. When Pilate discovered that Jesus was a Galilean, he thought he would rid himself of the problem by passing him off to Herod, the puppet king over Galilee, who was in Jerusalem for Passover. Jesus faced Herod in his fourth trial. But like Pilate, Herod could find nothing in the man that was worthy of death, so he sent Jesus back to Pilate for his fifth and final trial. The shrewd Jewish leaders, knowing that Pilate's standing before Caesar was precarious, assembled a crowd of Jews to wait at the steps of the Antonia fortress, the military garrison where Pilate resided when in Jerusalem. The restless mob presented the thinly veiled threat of an uprising if the governor did not accede to the Sanhedrin's wishes. Pilate, already fearing a Passover riot, felt every ounce of the pressure the Jews were applying. Yet, Pilate resisted. Though he was a jaded politician accustomed to bending justice at will, his conscience was not completely dead. He did not want to condemn this man who clearly did not deserve the death penalty. Adding to his uneasiness was his wife's urging that he spare Jesus, for she'd had a troubling dream indicating that he was innocent. Pilate sought desperately for a middle course that would both save Jesus and appease the unbending Jews. Pilate had Jesus brutally scourged, thinking such harsh punishment would satisfy the Jews' appetite for blood. When that failed to move them, he tried to release Jesus in accordance with a long-standing Roman custom to free a condemned Jewish prisoner, usually an insurrectionist, as a favor to the Jews during their Holy Week. But the mob, stirred to a frenzy by the Jewish leaders, would have none of it. They shouted over and over, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Luke 23, verse 21. Pilate now feared a full-fledged riot if he did not concede to their demand. He gave in and handed Jesus over to the Roman soldiers for crucifixion. In a futile attempt to evade responsibility for his cowardly act, he ordered a basin of water and washed his hands before the mob, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours." Matthew 27, verse 24. After seeing Jesus condemned, a deep wave of remorse overwhelmed Judas Iscariot. The bag of silver coins he had coveted now stood as an accusation against him. He could keep them no longer. He took them to the chief priests and confessed his sin, saying, "I have betrayed an innocent man." The officials callously retorted, "What do we care? That's your problem." Matthew 27, verse 4. That was the final blow for Judas. He could no longer bear the weight of his guilt. He hurled the blood money across the temple floor, ran out, and hanged himself.